I'm so excited to be talking to Chris Brindley about leadership and leadership today. Chris, hello.
Hi, Dave. Are you well?
I am terrifically well. Had a great week talking about leadership, strangely, on the road and into London this week. And we're whilst we don't want to timestamp this episode, I think this subject is an evergreen conversation. Leadership is suddenly everywhere, isn't it? What are
Yeah.
you finding, Chris?
Look, I talk about the difference between being a manufactured leader and being an authentic leader. And I meet lots of manufactured people that actually don't know who they are. They literally act shit, talk shit, and it feels shit for others on the end of it. So I just want people to be themselves. Of course, there's some models that I think enable you to lead better, be better. But the underpinning of it all for me is authenticity and integrity and be who you are. I always remember a great phrase that said, you really should be yourself because everybody else is taken.
That's a really good note to make to anyone listening, right? So let's take a look at what we're going to do together today. So you have been quoted, I believe, as being one of Britain's greatest ever business leaders. I mean, do you think that's true?
No. Well, I've been a leader in business. It's for others to decide the impact I had on them, their families, their business. So I don't self-profess anything, Dave. I'm just Chris, and I get up every morning and do my best.
Now, on that note, right, one of the things that we talk about and Coach Me is leadership fallacies, right? There's a lot of great content out there in the world of leadership over the last thousands of years, and particularly the last 100 years. But one of the things that I only realized about a month ago is a fallacy is great leadership, right?
Yeah,
Because of everything you just said, which was other people decide. You can't pursue being a great leader because it's not your choice, right?
absolutely.
Now then, today we're going to look at leadership from my book, and I'm going to ask you some questions that just from your business experience and life experience together, what you
Yeah,
think about the subject. So I'm going to give you 8 faces of leadership or leadership. You just get to
yeah.
talk about your version of it, right?
Right.
So the first chapter I wrote about the coexistence of authenticity and fakeness. And the
Yeah,
idea is that the simple idea is that they coexist because a new belief change or something you decide in your head that's different will always be fake first. And the mistake most people make is they don't prepare people around them that you've done that. It's like,
yeah,
surprise. And then everyone's saying, what's happened to Chris? Why is he acting like that? Right?
yeah,
Which
yeah.
creates this fakeness that's negative. In business, what's your experience of that relationship between the two things? Fake, good intention, authentic, best intention.
No, I'm a great believer that you act your way into a new way of thinking because
Yeah.
it's new and therefore it's more conscious. So therefore you have to think about it more. It becomes deliberate. And as a result of that, people might think you're faking it. It's not, it's just the process I'm going through of becoming knowledgeable, followed by skillful, followed by confidence. And that model is it's I don't know what I don't know, so I have to learn it. I then have to try it. And like a lot of new skills, competencies, it's clunky and awkward at the start. As I then reflect and review and I seek feedback, suddenly I start to know what works better. Then it becomes unconscious competence. So I do it because it's natural to me now. And you know, I always go, well, one of the questions I ask is everybody to go back and remember your first ever day at full-time work, whether you were 15, 16, 18, 21, 22, whenever. And ask yourself the question, if I gave you your inbox and email chains today that you got in front of you today on that first day of work, maybe 10, 20, in my case, 40 years ago, how good would you have been then? The answer is you've been crap. So you had to get from where you were to where you are, and to do that, you will have to act your way through it because it's a new skill set. Then it becomes second nature to you, And that can be a bad thing as well, because actually that means you just fall into habits, and some habits are good. And I always remember a teacher said to me once, if anyone ever tells you that practice makes perfect, they're lying to you, because all practice does, it makes permanent. So just be mindful of it becomes permanently bad versus that.
Yeah.
How do I get better at it? How do I learn? How do I keep refining it? So I think there is a complementary relationship between authenticity and fake. It's fake is how you start your journey.
Would you agree with me? And I loved your description, Chris, which I knew this was going to be a fun conversation already, right? That the key thing somebody can do is let someone know that's close to them the process they're embarking on, so that there's no surprises. People don't have that default. Oh, you've changed the color of your hair. Imagine it. Imagine if you and I had hair, right? Now the color, that you take away the surprise. And one of the things that I shared in the book was about notice, acknowledge, and experience. So what's the experience you want others to have that will help you go through the process? Do you agree with that?
Yeah. Dave, I came from a pretty humble upbringing, and we couldn't afford holidays. So what we had days out. And usually what those days out near us, we had a local newsagent, and he literally would write on a board, 1 day trip to Blackpool, Southport, and there was always one on there called the Mystery Tour.
Okay.
And I was told I was going on a mystery tour. It was the worst experience of my life, because I went past places I wanted to go and I ended up somewhere where I didn't want to go. And I vowed to that day, that day I vowed that if ever I became a leader, I would never take people on a mystery tour. I would always sit there and say, this is where we're going. This is why we're going. This is the route we're taking. There'll be some flexibility in there, but I just want you to know the destination. And then people have a choice as whether or not they come on that journey with you. So when I talk about change, or I talk about leadership, I tell people right at the outset, I contract with them and say, this is who I am. This is what I stand for. And I always ask people, what are the 3 things I could do that would piss you off? And people come up with micromanage, or you don't understand I'm a human being, you don't recognize I've got family, or, past leaders have taken credit for my work. And I give them a commitment that now I know what pisses them off, I will never intentionally do those things. And if I do, I give them permission to come and tell me that I've done it. So I don't believe in mystery tours and leadership. Why people think it's clever to keep everything a secret, I just don't know.
We'll talk about that in one of the chapters coming up called Connected or Cut Off. I totally love it. I love the idea of is your leadership a mystery tour? That's a LinkedIn post, right?
I'll leave that one with you, Dave. You write that.
Perfect. The second chapter we talk about is another problem, I think, in leadership, right? It's selfish or selfless. The classic cliche in the book is all about you can't give what you don't have, and you can't put on your your face mask second if you're on a plane, and we all understand that. What's your experience of leaders being selfless when they're empty? What's the worst you've seen and the best you've seen?
Just talk to me a little bit more about that, Dave. So I'll give you what I think is an answer. Because give me an example of either or both, just so I can benchmark it, please.
To be selfish, right? It's seen as a bad thing, but what I'm promoting is you have to be selfish with self-care, with your own mental well-being. You have to be selfish with your physical resources, your energy, how you look after yourself and your daily routines. You don't do those things. Being selfless, which is serving people as a leader, becomes really, really difficult. If you're being selfless and you don't take self-care, you're most likely going to be exhausted and therefore, ineffective.
Yeah, look, I remember a conversation with a senior leader when I was really young. I got told by my big boss that the big boss of the organisation was coming, and he wanted to do a tour of the area. And I was an area manager at the time, and therefore he was going to be in the car with me all day. Now, I saw that as a real opportunity. And I remember asking him a question. I said, I can see your success. I said, but what's the worst thing about your job? And what's the worst thing your job has caused? And there was a period of silence. It felt like 3 hours. It was probably 30 seconds.
Aye.
And he said, Chris, are you married? And I said, no. He said, have you got a partner? I said, no, but I've got a girlfriend and I'd love to marry her. And he went, so he said, let me give you a piece of my advice. He said, I'm a member of the MCC, I'm this, I'm that, I'm the other. He said, but I've not been a good father. He said, and my relationship with my son is damaged. He said, and he's had some terrible times, and I believe not being around and not being a father figure to him has caused that. And he said, just make sure that if you ever have children, you make sure that you're there for them. And so when you talk about that bit about being selfish, I am always clear, and I've been as a leader. I draw 3 circles at the start of every year. The first circle is the important dates for my family and me. The second circle is then where I'm going on holiday and leisure time. The third circle is work. And I make sure I populate circle 1 and 2 and work fits around it. I've met people who've missed birthdays and all sorts of really important days, ruined holidays, because they've not actually been able to separate work and life. And often they get burnt out. And there's a few people I know who are the richest people in the graveyard. They've died early, or their relationships with people are damaged beyond repair. And that's not what life's about. But so I remember being impacted by that selfless versus selfish. I created a program with my team, and we talked about care and show that you care. And we actually then started to say what matters most. And what we agreed was care and show that you care for yourself was the most important thing that you could possibly do.
Yeah.
And then we talked about care and show that you care for your colleagues, care and show that you care for your customers, care and show that you care for your community. And then the last one was care and show that you care for your business. Because ultimately, if you get the other 4 right, your business looks after itself. And it's a bit like those people who think they have to chase profit. For me, profit's a byproduct of great people doing great things for customers in the right way. And as a result of that, people recognize that will do business with you. So I think you're absolutely right that you've got to look after yourself first. And that is selfish. So again, I remember in one organization, I said to all my senior leaders, you can't send an email between 6 o'clock at night and 8 o'clock in the morning, because nothing's that urgent. And if it is, ring me. But what I didn't want people to do was start sending emails at 7, 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night. And therefore people felt the need to get the laptops out at 7, 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night. And it was selfish. And it wasn't a request, it was an order from me. And I checked people's mobile phones and emails. I just didn't want us to burn people out. I think quality recovery time for every individual is really, really important.
I love that. I just want to pull out your 3 circles. If anyone's listening to this and they're thinking, oh my goodness, I've never done that. Years ago, I used to do, I don't do it so much these days because I have less need to do it. But I used to go through my relationships every year, and I'd look at the ones that were adding to my energy or taking away from, and I'd change them. I'd change them dramatically. You don't tell the people that things just evolve. But my process was about making sure that the people close to me were in my diary, because that's the bit we mess. I love it. Let's talk about another belter. Are you ready for a belter? I thought I'd bring a Wigan phrase into it, right? Motivation or mindset, right? The argument we like to propose is which one's more important. Now, I'll give you a bit of an inside scoop. I believe, and I do think I'm guilty of the aggregate of my life, right? I believe today, because of that, if you've got a mindset framework that you stick to that makes you better at who you are, motivation is 10%, right? Mindset framework, 90%. But for most of us, early in our life, we rely on motivation to get the car started, right?
Yeah.
And if your car's run out of gas, for the Americans, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't matter how motivated you are, it ain't starting, right?
Yeah.
So what's your view on motivation and its importance or mindset?
I have a formula, Dave, that I'll share with you. And when I recruit anybody, I have a sliding scale of between 0 and 100. And I work out what percentage split I want between personal qualities, and that includes mindset,
Yeah.
and technical skills. So if I'm recruiting a brain surgeon, typically, I think I'll be high on technical skills and perhaps not as high on personal qualities. Because ultimately, if somebody's got a great attitude and is motivated to do my brain surgery, but they've got no technical skills, quite frankly, I'm not letting them anywhere near me. Well,
That's
whereas
right.
for other roles where there's not a lot of technical skill needed, actually, I look at what personal qualities, and that might be ability to smile, ability to engage, ability to understand and listen, actively listen. So I do that, and then I talk about having those two. But ultimately, if I stay in bed all day, the fact that I've got personal qualities and technical skills, I'm not going to get anything achieved. So I talk about consistency and habit. And habit is correct and frequent practice. And the example I use is I like to think I'm competitive. I like to think I'm highly motivated, to use your word. However, I've never played a game of golf in my life. So the reality is, despite my motivation, my attitude and everything, I do not believe if somebody gave me a set of golf clubs like around a local course and said, "Can you do it in par?" that I'd do it. Then what shit leaders sometimes do? Go, "I'm going to give you an incentive, Chris." Well, I'll tell you what, you could put £10 million on the table now for me to go around that golf course in 72 and your money's safe.
Yeah.
So I think it is. Motivation might get you started, but ultimately mindset, which is this is going to be a tough journey, right? It's never going to be easy, right? What do I do when the challenging times come? That's mindset, about an empowered mindset, knowing I'm on a journey, knowing every step. And Thomas Edison reminded me that, he went through thousands of iterations to create light. And I meet lots of people that if they were Thomas Edison would still be in the dark because they've given up after 2 occasions, it didn't work. So I always look at those personal qualities, but I still think every role needs some element of technical skills. And in some areas now with technology, you don't always need the technical skills because technology does it for you. So then goes back to your mindset. For me, motivation is motive for action, and it's often what gets me started. It's my personal qualities, my technical skills that will determine whether I finish.
Love it. And of course, all that great work that's out there about habit stacking and knowing stuff. One of the things I'd like someone to think about from us chatting about your great answers is, do you know what if you're listening to this, do you actually know what your personal motivators are? And if you don't, it's really worth stopping and thinking about it. Let's look at another chapter from the book. This one is also interesting. You were referring to it earlier, right? So it's connected or cut off. And I think connected, makes the most sense. Most people could work that out. But I know clients of ours over the years who've proactively said, sorry, we can't tell you about that. And in a review, in a team meeting, right? And it's a board directive. And they wouldn't tell people anything more than a 60-day period what's coming next in massive brands. And I have to tell you, the behavioral shite that creates is horrendous. What's your experience of the worst cut off in communication?
I think it's keeping secrets and people thinking that power is knowledge. And I talk about trust. And I remember going into one meeting where somebody was asking me for lots of reports and reports and reports. And I said, "Do you trust me?" And they said, "Yes." So, well, I'm not filling in your report then. Because ultimately, what it often does is create anxiety. It creates vacuums. And if there's a communication vacuum, for example, Dave, I think it gets filled with myth, legend and lies. And as a result of that, people then start making uninformed decisions
Yeah.
based on the wrong thing. So I'm a great believer in absolutely having pathways and talking pathways. And some people say the only reason I'm going to tell you 60 days, Chris, is if I tell you something and it doesn't happen, you think I'm an idiot. I'll tell you, well, I think you're more of an idiot for not telling me what might happen. At least I can plan and prepare for it. At least I
Yeah.
can have a conversation. At least I can get myself ready. This dropping in on people, swooping and dumping and causing surprises, I just think it's unhelpful. You know, I always ask a question, and you know, your viewers and listeners, ask yourself this: have you ever worked for a boss that when they walked in the room, you didn't know whether you were going to be kissed or kicked?
That's great. Yeah.
Because that's abuse. You know,
Yeah.
I think people crave consistency, and I think communication is something that, you know, trust people with it, share people, you know, and funnily enough, I think they respond brilliantly rather than cower or stop sharing their own thoughts and ideas. As a result of that, the business is losing people's brains. And I've always had people's brains for free because if I trust them and they trust me, we can have great communication, great conversation, and everybody then becomes an ideas factory. So I tell everybody, what do you think? That's one of the best questions I think anyone can ask. Well, this is where we're going. I said earlier about mystery tours. So I've always wanted bosses to map out Gantt charts, what racing, whatever models you want to use, but just tell me what's going on because I might be
Yeah.
able to help.
It's really interesting. In my framework book, one of the biggest thing it fixes is that people get to see where they're going. And if you know where you're going and you can put yourself in that story, you can make a better difference. You'll add more value. There's two things in the chapter I'd like to just share with everybody. An NLP principle of the owner of the communication is responsible for the results. And I get asked
Yeah.
every so often, Dave, how many times should I tell somebody the same thing? The answer is however many it takes, right? Because you are the reason why they didn't get it. And I am one of the most guilty because I see the world in extreme ways. They're not extreme. I just don't always remember that my map is what it is. And it's sometimes,
Yeah.
you know, it's Dave Landria, right? So I have to get off Dave Landria and step into real life. But with that in mind, that's an example, isn't it? But I think from a connection perspective, what's your favorite connected moment from your vast career?
Wow. 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 It's when a new boss, asked me to do a piece of work. I did the piece of work, and I remember he said, "What are you doing this weekend?" And I said, "Oh, I'm taking my son to rugby Saturday morning." And he went, "Great, Saturday afternoon, Sunday." And he knew where I'd be Saturday morning. So he phoned home knowing I wasn't there. And Elaine, my wife, answered the phone. He said, "Hi, it's Mike here. Is Chris in?" "No." "Oh, can you pass on a message for me, Elaine? I just want him to know that the piece of work he did was absolutely brilliant." And the reason he did that was so he could then let Elaine know how grateful he was to her for me being away for a few days, away from the family and her, to do this piece of work. And then, literally at noon that day, a nice bottle of wine arrived, courtesy of him. Chris and Elaine, enjoy this, and it made me feel like I wanted to walk through, you know, whatever storms we were going to go through as an organisation for that man, and I felt connected to him. That was 25 years ago. I
Wow.
meet Mike every single quarter. I buy him breakfast for being one of the best bosses I've ever had. And to prove that it must be special, he supports Man City and I support Man United.
You know, that's the icing on the cake for how things can work together in harmony, regardless of the difference. I love it. I think it's a great example. You know, I've never heard somebody do that. You know, I've been coaching for 20 years.
Oh,
I've never heard somebody do that, go through the process of taking that level of care to leave a feeling of value and connection. Let's talk about the next phase, Chris. It's inspired or expired. Now, quite often I introduce myself as a leadership paramedic, and somebody will say to you, well, what's a leadership paramedic? I stop leaders killing their people, right?
Yeah.
And I have lots of different versions of that depending on what I'm doing and why I'm at a place at any given time. But expiration's a problem in business, isn't it? It's where we just drive our workforce's energy to a standstill. What's your experience of expiration, and why do you think inspiration matters today more than ever?
Look, I think some people confuse getting a task done with taking enough care of the people who want to achieve the task. So I love the model of sport. So I always talk about people, if you want really to be consistent through your people, I think we should all warm up. I think then we go through that moment of peak performance. I then think we should warm down. And then I think we should all have some quality recovery time. And I always talk about that model, and whether that is a single meeting. I think if you warm up for a meeting, knowing who's going to be there, what it's about, what questions you want to ask, then you can move into peak performance. Because you've given it some thought beforehand in the warm-up, you're likely to perform better. You're going to do some active listening. You're going to introduce some topics of conversation because you've thought about that. You might produce some evidence, some insight. Then I always talk about warming down in a meeting as if you've got any action points for anybody else, can you send those now whilst we're still in the meeting?
Yeah.
Because if you don't, and you have 3 or 4 meetings a day with 3 or 4 action points, you get to the end of the day, you've got 16 action points for other people when you're the leader. And what do? You have your tea, wait for the kids to go to bed, then you start bombarding your team with things to do. And leader shit is when you say, I am just sending this email with all these tasks, but I'm recognizing that you're at home right now and you don't need to do it. Well, here's the answer. Don't send the email, right? Do not send it. Do not give shit like, I know you're having a bit of quiet time, but I'm going to send it anyway. Because that's selfish. That's getting off your desk. So I think then, if you did that every meeting, it enables the people to receive the message during the workday. It enables them to prioritize. And actually, it just enables people to operate better. So for me, that model of warm up, peak performance, warm down, quality recovery time, it could do for an individual meeting, it could be for a project, all the time, understanding that people have an amount of energy. And when it's gone and fatigue kicks in, you cannot peak perform. You can't. So always think about warm down, quality recovery time, refuel, rehydrate, go and do something different, relax in your own way. And actually, that model is always uppermost in my mind in any workplace or personal relationship I have. I know people can have enough of me, so they need time away from me, and that includes my wife and my kids. So again, I'm going to warm down and have some quality recovery time, but I'm also going to give you the ability to have some quality recovery time from me.
Yeah, I love it. I think that's a really great suggestion. Debbie coaches about taking 7 minutes out of a meeting to execute. And I think we should land that really clearly right now, that if you're listening to this as an action to inspire, you'll inspire your people when you respect that moment of time and you don't create the shit list in the evening. That's a terrific suggestion. And I don't see any reason any company couldn't do it.
Agreed.
Good. Let's have a look at another one. I think we have a couple to go, right? So, and I want to talk to you about meaningfulness or meaningless, right? So it's really interesting. Years ago, I did some work in a fabrication factory, and only for a week. And I'll never forget the level of literal repetition. But I was always surprised how there were two types of person. There were those that put their trainers facing the door and left straight away, right?
Yeah.
And didn't even clear up. And then there were others who had worked out what the job meant to them And when I found that out and I'd asked questions in my research whilst I actually did welding jobs, right? Um, I found out that they were planning stuff, doing extra hours for stuff. They knew what their kids wanted. They understood what their family wanted. And work was just a process. And I think even in that process-driven environment, I found people knew their meaning.
Yeah.
Yet, in less process engineering environments, with big companies who are massively successful, they appear to not give a shit about the meaning. How important was meaning at work to you throughout your career?
Oh, I purpose and why I was doing things. Um, I believe I was put on this earth to help others. My
Yeah.
mum taught that. She said, as a kid, I used to run everywhere, Dave, still do. And my mum would say to me, if I was ever got to the shops for her, will you knock on the old ladies' doors in the avenue? Because by the time you're back, they'll have just got the coat on. So go and help them. And therefore, I think I've always had a purpose. And the story I tell now is about having a cause. And I believe when, as a leader, I always talk to people about what our why is. And I know Simon Sinek does a great YouTube. But Humphrey Walters, in his book, The Little Book of Winning, talks about three things as a great team. And the first one is cause. And I'm a Mancunian, and if you were to visit me in Manchester, I'd probably meet you at a place called St. Peter's Square. And that's where the Peterloo riots happened, and people lost their lives. But they lost their lives because they wanted workers' rights. And in the same square is a statue of Emmeline Pankhurst, who was a born Mancunian. And, people in the suffragette movement gave up their lives. Why? Because they had a real cause. Emma Davidson gave her life up. And that was for women's votes. And in the same square is the cenotaph. And people gave their lives. And often that's for the cause. And I think one of the jobs of leaders is to understand and help people connect to what it is they do. And there's a wonderful story about a man with bricks in front of him. And somebody said, "What do you do?" He said, I just put bricks together." They went to the next man and he said, "What do you do?" He said, "Well, I'm building a wall." And he went to the third man in line. He said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm building a cathedral." And two were task, and the other was connection and cause and meaningful. So I think leaders can have a massive role in explaining what we do and why we do it and what it means to the people at the other end and how it will inspire them. Leaving your thumbprint on the world is about, can I have a purpose, whether that's personally or professionally, Dave, for me.
I love it. And one of the things I'm noticing with our clients today is goal fatigue and production fatigue. And without jumping into that as a micro subject, one of the answers to overcoming that is to understand this stuff, which is what's the meaning in your colleague, in your teammate's life that matters the most to them, that you're going to help them with. And if you help them with that, goal fatigue will disappear. And yet we get lost in this new fatigue, which it's a real thing where people aren't motivated as much as they were because of everything that's happened in the last 5 years, what's coming, what's on the street today in the world, right? It's so hard. Whereas if you can reconnect to that meaning in any of these circumstances, you can help them past it. So we got two to go. Revolution or evolution is about the death of change. Now, I know people who say to me, Debbie likes change, right? My wife, she loves change. She'll change the house over and over again. She's won a TV show, so I've got no challenge, right? And luxury beyond my mind. But the thing about change in business is we learn the lines. It's like going to church and singing a song, right? We just know the lines because we were told it at school at some point. But if you ask somebody how do they intrinsically feel about change, and then we tie that to neuroscience and brain performance, it isn't something that we want. And what I'm saying in the book, I've been saying it probably for about 12 years, stop talking about change the narrative, make it easier. And in the book, I give people a choice. Revolution is your market is screwed. You got to do something about it. Revolution is something that no one has ever done before. right? Evolution are small changes that go back to the previous chapters that we've clearly marked out we're all doing together, and we're going to win at them, right? Even if we win by messing them up, right? But at no point do we use the word change unless we add the letter D to it, which turns it into changed, right?
Yeah.
And you're looking back going, look how much we've done, right? Which I did one time earlier this year in a meeting where it was actually last year in August. I had this team in Colorado and Oklahoma, and they'd had a really tough period with a software change. And I asked them to list everything they'd individually achieved in 1 month. They had 42 things on the list. 2 things, right? 5 out of 10 go, oh, it's been so. But when they saw the 42, they went, we're killing it. And it was missed in the operational conundrum. That's changed looking back and realizing, look how good we've been, right?
Yeah.
But not bringing it into the language of every day. So here's the thing. What do you think of evolution and revolution, and which do you prefer? Is it do something no one's done before, or help somebody in crisis, or is it evolution, or is it a bit of both? What do you prefer?
It's both for me. Absolutely both. And I talk about 3 revolutions. Guy called Jack Black, and I don't mean the American actor. I'm on about a wonderful Scottish man that helped me really understand leadership and thinking, gosh, a long time ago, 30 years ago. And Jack used to say, and he first said this in 1996, he said, there's 3 revolutions going on in the world that you won't see in the front of a newspaper and you won't hear on the 6 o'clock news. He says, but trust me, they're happening. And therefore, the quicker you understand them, the quicker you can see the future and make the future work for you, and don't be a product of it. You create your own. And that first revolution was technology revolution. And I think revolution is happening, whether that's ChatGPT, AI, all of that stuff. Then there's the consumer revolution. I think the way consumers think and act are very different now than when I was growing up. And then the third one is the world order. And world order changes on a micro level. If you get a new boss or a new neighbour, the world's changed. It's never the same. It's either better or worse. And then you get the big ones, whether that's unrest in the Middle East, in Ukraine, or new governments that we've seen in the UK and in America. And those can be revolutionary. But ultimately, you sit there and go, things are going to change. So I talk about understanding that that's the reality. And I look at organisations that, when I was growing up as a kid, you bought a Kodak camera that had to have a Kodak film, and the photos were printed on Kodak paper. Funnily enough, doesn't exist anymore. And so an organisation that owned the end-to-end process doesn't exist because it didn't understand that the revolutions were happening. And you know, Blockbuster, there used to be 16,000 worldwide. Now there's one, and it's a museum in America. And at its height, my kids love Blockbuster. But funnily enough, now they're 32 and 28, they like Netflix, and they pay $14.99 a month for the privilege of it. So I think there are revolutions, but I think understanding that actually we do achieve an awful lot. I always tell people the first change program you really go through in your life is when you move from 4 limbs onto 2. So if you can do that a matter of months, actually life then is a series of, I can achieve this, and I can achieve, and I can achieve. So I think you're right when you sit there and focus on what you have done rather than what you haven't done. And my old football coach was a guy called Eric Harrison. Eric used to talk about the workplace with something he called the 90-10 principle. He said 90% of your job, of your life, he said, will be great. He said 10% will be nonsense. He says, but never make the mistake of converting the 10% into 100%. So you think everything's wrong, nothing's ever going to get any better, and everything you've ever tried, you failed at. He went, never let that consume you. Keep remembering 90% of everything you do is really cool, is really good, and has usually resulted in you having to have changed. So keep recognizing the successes. And funnily enough, that's how I try to build on my successes. I don't just sit there and spend my life in the circle of anxiety and concern. I move quickly to the circles of influence or the circle of control, because ultimately I'm in control of an awful lot, and therefore it becomes my choice.
I love it. And that takes us beautifully into the last part today. I'm a fan of evolution. I absolutely love revolution, doing stuff that's not been done. But I love guiding people with evolution where they take control of it and they remove some of the stuff. In the book, I also talk about belief plus skills plus results plus experience equals the change you want to see. But let's talk about the last one. I think you're going to love this one. Reality or illusion. There's a code in social media, and a couple of my author friends use it really, really well. It's called in real life, IRL, right? And I think reality or illusion skates both of them. What we often find is most leaders are stuck in delusion, right? If you're storming a new marketplace and nobody believes you and you win, right? But that is a 0 point something percentile point, isn't it? It's like so unlikely. But in your opinion, how did you handle the moments when you were in an illusion and you needed to move back into reality? What was your secret to doing that? Because that's hard, isn't it?
First of all, I'm a fan of illusion because I do a lot of visualization.
Yeah.
I do a lot of what I want my future to look like. And I firmly believe that what I think about, I can achieve. So if it's ever delusion, I usually have a group of people around me that when they give me feedback, I listen because they care. So what sometimes to step back is just to have that moment of feedback and that moment of reflection. So I often understand that there'll be temporary setbacks in my illusions, in my dreams and my goals. So I get that. But I always remember a quote from Abraham Lincoln that said, if you give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, I'll spend the first 4 hours sharpening my axe. And often what I'll do is always make sure I take time to sharpen my axe. So I can spend a bit of time doing some critical thinking of what the future looks like, rather than getting to that place where it's hurt or it's harder than it absolutely needs to be to step back. So I tend to live by both. In real time's fine, but ultimately I spend my life thinking, what do I want it to look like? Who am I going to help? And therefore visualization, goal setting, being unreasonable often, Dave, with my goals. And spookily enough, as I said earlier, what you think you can be, fully enough you can achieve. I think there's a phrase, isn't there? What you believe, you achieve type stuff. So I'm a fan of both in real time, but never stop the dream. And I go back to my secondary school every year and they do the same presentation. And it's entitled Dreams Are Free. Because I want people to dream. Because sometimes reality is people get told that's all there is for the rest of their life. And I'm sitting there going, actually, you can change your circumstances. I came from a council house background, single parent family. Lots of reasons people told me I couldn't be who I am and what I wanted to do. Well, I just didn't believe them, Dave. I actually believed in the dream and never let that ever, the reality of what I was in, actually handcuff me to the circumstances. I think you can break free.
I think you absolutely can. I totally agree. I think that there's a bit on reality that is about when businesses don't look at their situation for what it is. And I think that's the only clarification on reality. And I think illusion is where your brain doesn't know the difference between what's real and what isn't. And you can tap into that process backed up by now, all these years later, by neuroscience. And you can, your brain doesn't care, right? Your brain just wants to know what to do. And if you don't take control of that, it'll do it to you. And you should feel sad about that, because that's not necessarily a great existence, depending on who you are and how you're wired. But I love the fact that you're talking about dreaming, keep dreaming, think big, because I guess my final question to you as we bring this Great conversation about the 8 faces of leadership or leadership that we're having together to a close. One of the things that when I was rewriting the book that really caught my own imagination was the need for hope, the need for something, right? What's your view on hope in the world today as it is right now? What do you think will be the importance of hope tomorrow?
Can I answer it in a slightly different way, Dave?
Of course you can.
Because first of all, I was part of a program by a lady called Penny Ferguson called The Living Leader. And one task she gave us all one night, which said, by 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, after you've woken up, I want you to have written down 50 things you're grateful for. And everybody went, 50 by 9 o'clock? No. And actually, when we got together the next day, funnily enough, there were easily 50 things. Number one, I woke up this morning. I'm really grateful I did. But maybe some of it other people aren't, but I am. Secondly, I woke up in a bed, so I'm grateful for that. Elaine, my wife, woke up. I'm really grateful for that. The 2 children woke up and healthy. I'm grateful for that. I had running water. I went downstairs. I'm in a home. I opened the fridge. I've got food. Put the kettle on. I've got electricity. I got some clothes. I got ready for work, and it means I've got a job. I spent a bit of money this morning getting a green tea at Starbucks, so I've got some money, and all of that. And when I talk about hope, I have it grounded in. Let's never forget that we have an awful lot to be grateful for, and therefore, when I do look at some of the nonsense going on in the world, this morning when I woke up before 9 o'clock, I did my 50. I sit there and go, you know what? I am hopeful. I am hopeful because I've met some new people today. We've had this chat. For me, that just continues the journey. And every interaction like that just continues to build up my belief that actually life is wonderful. And it's the 90-10 principle again. There is nonsense going on. But ultimately, and the other 3 circles I alluded to a little bit earlier, if you spend all your life in the circle of anxiety and concern, you'll just end up being paralyzed in terms of taking action. The second circle is influence. Who can you work with that can help influence things to be better, to be different? And the big circle where I spend a lot of my time is the circle of control. Because I have an awful lot of control and an awful lot of choices about me and how I choose to read more, learn more, stop listening to nonsense and some mainstream media because it's all bad news. Actually, no, I'm going to actually look for good things in people and situations. So, I live in eternal hope, and it's reinforced thousands of times a day by the people I meet and the situations I encounter of good people doing good things.
I love it. That's a really nice way to bring this conversation to a natural conclusion. There's so much gold in our conversation to look back and reflect on, Chris, from just the 90-10 principle alone.
Yeah.
Don't 10% become the 100. Remember, 90% of your life is going to be the 3 circles about what you do at the start of the year, right the way through to getting that connection. Fabulous things to stop. And I can't wait to see even just the transcript of the stuff we talk. We have been talking today about leadership or leadership and the need for leadership to have a rethink, to have a new way of doing it, and to be more thought through in what we're doing with leadership. Chris Brindley, you have been an absolute star. Thanks for taking the time for this first podcast recording. We are going to get in about a month's time to talk about daily leadership principles that we teach around the world and the 7 things you can put into your business. But this has been about personal consumption. Thank you so much for your time, Chris.
Oh, thanks for the invitation. Absolute privilege to be on the call with you.